Ladies and gentlemen, President Trump has just signed the single most important executive order in all of American history. Take a look.
In a few moments, I will sign a historic executive order instituting reciprocal tariffs on countries throughout the world. Reciprocal. That means they do it to us and we do it to them. Very simple. Can't get any simpler than that. This is one of the most important days, in my opinion, in American history. It's our declaration of economic independence. For years, hardworking American citizens were forced to sit on the sidelines as other nations got rich and powerful, much of it at our expense. But now it's our turn to prosper, and in so doing, use trillions and trillions of dollars to reduce our taxes and pay down our national debt, and it'll all happen very quickly. With today's action, we are finally going to be able to make America great again, greater than ever before.
Now, folks, this is some monumental news. So today, let's try to break it all down. First off, we need to acknowledge that President Trump's new tariffs are absolutely genius because, as you might notice, in most cases, he's only imposing a reciprocal tariff that is half as great as what the other country is currently imposing on us. What this does is completely dismantle the narrative that Trump's tariffs are unwarranted, unfair, or uncalled for. In reality, almost every other country on Earth has maintained tariffs on the United States of America for decades that have been targeted at siphoning off the wealth of the American taxpayer, so now President Trump is leveling the playing field. Most notably, President Trump has imposed a 34% tariff on China, a 26% tariff on India, and a 20% tariff on the European Union. And as Trump has said on multiple occasions, these tariffs can be reduced if the other countries agree to reduce their own tariffs on the United States. So really, what President Trump wants is a fair playing field because, like we've said, for decades now, the United States has been getting absolutely ripped off as a consequence of our country's incompetent leadership and other countries' predatory behavior. In fact, take a look at what President Trump's Commerce Secretary, a guy named Howard Lutnick, had to say about all of these trade imbalances.
Europe does not treat our products fairly. They do not treat our companies fairly. They treat themselves incredibly well to the detriment of the United States of America, right? It is time for them to treat us fairly, and that is the point. It's not free and fair trade. Their tariffs are higher. The non-tariff trade barriers are incredible. Like, I'd ask you, why don't they take our beef? Why don't they take our agricultural products? Why? Because they don't want them, because they want to make the money themselves. Why is it okay for every other country to feel this way, and it's not okay for America? I tell you why. Because we were the world's piggy bank, and Donald Trump has said our $36 trillion deficit, our $1.2 trillion trade deficit, $1.2 trillion. We buy other people's things more than we sell them ours, has got to be rebalanced. It's a national emergency. Let's fix America, and we can.
And so, folks, everything he just said is 100% absolutely true. But you know what? He's not the only one that's sounding the alarm on all of this. Take a look.
Let's be perfectly clear, Stu. For decades, a lot of these countries have built their economies on the back of the American economy. We've given them free access to America's markets. They have been charging us massively to try to send anything to their countries. And the way I equate it as a corollary is United States basketball. Back in '92, when it was the Dream Team, it didn't matter what team you threw out there. We were going to dominate them, and it was going to really be ugly. Today's Dream Team, we still win the gold, but the games are harder. We got to compete. It's the same thing in the global economy. These nations have become not just developing nations, they are now strong economies. And so we have to have fair trade if you're going to have free trade. And so that's why the president's plan, I think, is going to work for the American people, and it's going to work for high-paying jobs for the Americans over the long term.
You hear that, folks? You need to have fair trade if you want to have free trade. And the reality is, for decades now, countries around the world have been absolutely abusing our romantic obsession with free trade economics. We have been getting taken advantage of. But you know what? For a really great in-depth breakdown of all of this, take a look at this next clip.
China, Vietnam, India, they charge us an arm and a leg. I don't think people realized how bad it was until the president came out with it yesterday.
That's right, Stuart. And those numbers reflect not just the tariffs that are the statutory number that's applied to the good when it goes overseas, but they also include all of the non-tariff barriers. Those in many cases are significantly larger. So when you think about the intellectual property theft, when you think about the subsidies that are illegally provided in violation of treaties, when you look at the currency manipulation that takes place, all of those factors are what we call non-tariff barriers. And in many cases, they're larger than the stipulated tariffs. And so when you add all of them together, as that chart shows, our manufacturers are at a significant disadvantage relative to the foreign firms for which they're competing to provide product here in the United States. And as the president campaigned on, it's important that our manufacturers face a similar type of environment when they seek to sell overseas. We know that we have the best companies and the best workers in the world. The president's plan is to make sure that they can compete with manufacturers around the world who are getting protection from their home countries.
Now, folks, it's worth noting that none of this is just some half-baked idea that President Trump just recently came up with. To the contrary, Trump has been sounding the alarm on all of these trade imbalances for decades now. In fact, take a look at this clip featuring Donald Trump from the 1980s.
And yet we let Japan come in and dump everything right into our markets and everything. It's not free trade. If you ever go to Japan right now and try to sell something, forget about it, Oprah. Just forget about it. It's almost impossible. They don't have laws against it. They just make it impossible. They come over here, they sell their cars, their VCRs, they knock the hell out of our companies. And, hey, I have tremendous respect for the Japanese people. I mean, you can respect somebody that's beating the hell out of you, but they are beating the hell out of this country. Kuwait, they live like kings. The poorest person in Kuwait, they live like kings. And yet they're not paying. We make it possible for them to sell their oil. Why aren't they paying us 25% of what they're making? It's a joke.
And so, folks, here's the truth. Trump was correct in the 80s, and you know what? He's even more correct now in the 20s. The reality is, we have been getting ripped off for decades. But you want to know the craziest thing about all of this? Despite the nonstop screaming coming from the progressive left right now, President Trump's tariffs are actually already working. As a consequence of President Trump's tariffs, both Venezuela and Colombia have agreed to accept back their criminal deportees. Mexico is now spending tens of millions of dollars every month to secure their side of the border, and as of yesterday, Canada is begging Trump to ease off on the tariffs. Seriously, after all of the tough talk from Canada's progressive leadership, they've folded in less than a week. Because here's the reality, folks. Yes, these other countries have been ripping us off for decades, but they all know deep down that when push comes to shove, the United States holds all the cards. But you know what? Okay, what really will be the impact of all of these tariffs?
The administration estimates the Trump tariffs will bring in $600 billion in the first year to the Treasury General Fund. The president's extra 25% tariffs on autos alone expected to generate $100 billion on top of the reciprocal tariffs. So those tariffs on just about all countries is meant to level the trade playing field. The extra 25% tariffs on autos and others meant to protect 7 industries the president has deemed critical. You see those industries there, autos on the list, along with semiconductors, labor, steel, aluminum, and the others.
Wow, you hear that, folks? So these tariffs are expected to bring in hundreds of billions of dollars per year, as well as help protect some of America's most important manufacturing sectors. And as we've all seen time and time again, economic growth always follows tariff-driven manufacturing investments, evidenced by steel and auto industries thriving under Trump's protective measures. Really, Trump's tariffs have proven to be a master stroke to boost U.S. manufacturing, igniting a resurgence of factories and jobs that the globalists have long abandoned. Because here's the reality. Trump's tariffs protect American jobs from foreign exploitation, shielding workers from the predatory practices of nations that undercut fair competition. American workers can't compete with Southeast Asian slave labor, and you know what? They shouldn't have to. And as you all know, in just around 2 months, President Trump has already been able to secure $5 trillion worth of manufacturing investments right here back in the United States of America. Seriously, folks, President Trump's economic policies are revitalizing the American economy in a way that we haven't seen for decades. But hey, check this out. On top of all of that, Trump is going to be using all of this tariff-driven revenue to fund tax cuts for everyday Americans, channeling foreign money back into the pockets of hardworking citizens who actually deserve it. In fact, just yesterday afternoon, President Trump doubled down on his plan to completely abolish the Internal Revenue Service and replace it with the External Revenue Service entirely funded by his trade tariffs. So hey, I don't want to be overly optimistic here. I know that tax day is coming up here pretty soon, but folks, this might be the last year that we all pay a federal income tax. But you know what? Here's maybe the best part about all of this. For decades now, our national debt has ballooned to an almost incomprehensible size, and not a single politician for decades has even floated a plan to shrink it back down. And it's worth keeping in mind when we're talking about our country's national debt, what we've been doing is just kicking the can down the road and condemning millions of unborn Americans to solve the problems that we have refused to solve ourselves. That, ladies and gentlemen, has got to come to an end. So now, finally, with President Trump's tariffs, we actually have a path towards cutting down the deficit, paying off our national debt, and making America economically competitive on a global level for the first time in decades. So you know what? Here's my final take on all of this. The progressive left-wing media can kick and scream about President Trump's tariffs all they want, but here's the reality. Trump's tariffs are already working, and we're just getting started. Now, folks, before we wrap up with today's video, I want to say real quick that I've actually gone ahead and made a community Facebook page where I'll be posting additional news and updates as it relates to all of this. So hey, if you guys use Facebook, check out the pinned comment down below and give that page a follow. But everyone, that is going to be a wrap for today's video, so please go down below and drop a comment. Let me know what you think about all of this. Please like the video while you're down there. As I always say, please consider subscribing to the channel because it really does help a ton. Thank you all very much for tuning in today, and of course, as always, stay safe.